In the history of mankind, the world of weaponry has blossomed into an ever-growing industry. From handheld devices to destructive vehicles, there have been many crazy inventions. However, not all of them are logical or even necessary. We've rounded up the 15 weirdest weapons ever invented. Let's check them out. If you're a World War II buff, you may have already heard of the Bob Semple tank. But for those that haven't, we preface this by saying it's been dubbed as one of the weirdest tanks in history. Warfare in the 20th century heavily involved tanks, and manufacturers wanted to outdo each other. However, we think Bob Semple took the cake. The fall of France and the New Zealand government are to blame for this ridiculous tank, not just Bob Semple. After the immense loss France took, the government gave Semple the okay to combine tractors that they had into tanks. This was done to save costs and help replenish losses even quicker. Semple essentially had to work without any blueprints and created a convoluted box-like structure that was manned by 8 crew members. Weapons included in this tank included Bren light machine guns all around the tank for 360-degree cover. The engine was a 6-cylinder diesel and went extremely fast considering the weight of it all, 13 miles per hour for the massive 25-ton hunk of metal. While the tank utilized materials that the government and manufacturer already had, the tank was essentially a functional flop and definitely wouldn't survive a full-on Japanese invasion. Most of the weapons we'll be discussing came from the World War II era, where technology was limited but troops needed the best. In such dire times, weapons like the Panzerfaust were created and deployed. However, just because they were deployed and used doesn't mean they weren't ridiculous. For those that play video games or history buffs, a powerful and recoilless anti-tank weapon sounds like a dream and couldn't possibly be real. Thanks to its predecessor, the Faust Patron, the Panzerfaust was created for soldiers to be more mobile while destroying tanks. In short, this handheld tiki torch-like weapon could penetrate up to 5.5 inches of armor, with tubing that could be disposed of right after using. This rocket-type weapon had a crude aiming mechanism with a fixed range of 100 feet, and eventually led the weapon to be made in various sizes and weights. While primarily an anti-tank gun, the Battle of Normandy only saw 6% of tank losses from the British side due to this weapon. Thankfully, the thought of using the Panzerfaust encouraged tank forces to wait for infantry before moving forward. When you think of a submarine, a body of water comes to mind, as they were originally created to explore crazy water depths that the human body couldn't possibly survive on their own. In the mid-20th century, the Soviet Union had other ideas though. Boris Ushakov proposed the idea of a flying submarine to the Naval Engineering Institute, which put him as head of the project. Over a year after the project was led by Ushakov, it received a second evaluation by a committee. The original design posed a flying object that was composed of all metal and could reach speeds of 115 miles per hour in the air, but only 3.5 miles per hour when in the water. Since submarines existed during this time, you might be wondering what the primary advantage of this multi-environment vehicle may be. Ushakov thought that the maneuverability of his flying submarine could counter traditional subs used by enemies. Unfortunately, the project was temporarily suspended just a year later in 1939, but then resumed 5 years later under the orders of Chief Lavrenti Beria. 2 years after that, in 1947, the first test trial was performed. Ushakov's high didn't last for long, as the Communist Party ordered the project to be shut down in 1953. Nuclear weaponry has caused verbal as well as physical destruction between countries for decades. While many countries often discuss the deconstruction of nuclear weaponry, at one point, engineering for this weaponry was at an all-time high. Developed in the late 1950s, the smallest nuclear weapon was created. Dubbed Davy Crockett, this nuclear bomb was used to aid armies with incredible power against the Soviet troops. The Davy Crockett wasn't used to completely demolish an area like Nagasaki though. The intention was to incapacitate an area for no more than 48 hours. During the 48 hours after deployment, troops wouldn't be able to form, and NATO forces could mobilize. The yield of this Cold War-era weapon had the equivalent of up to 20 tons of TNT. The Davy Crockett weighed roughly 51 pounds and was originally tested in July of 1962. Unfortunately, it was taken out of commission in August of 1967. You may have seen the use of the Davy Crockett in video games like Fallout and Metal Gear Solid 3. The Faust is a German-made prototype aimed to be a man-portable, ground-to-air launcher for destroying enemy planes. A weapon idea for World War II, this 14.3-pound weapon never quite made takeoff. While there were 4 million ordered for 10,000 launchers, only a few were produced. This rocket launcher was supposed to cut back on costs while providing portability that didn't have to be babysat. On paper, the range was designed to be as large as 500 meters. But unfortunately, it could never reach that goal, ultimately leading to deconstruction and shelving the idea. The Panzerfaust Mind was a torpedo-like grenade used for anti-tank purposes and left quite an impact in real life, as well as video games. Used in World War II by Luftwaffe troops, this handheld anti-tank grenade had the premise of being effective against armor as well, but it had to be launched at a certain angle to be effective. To make the impact of the warhead effectively, it had to hit at a 90-degree angle. Nothing more, nothing less. Because of this and lack of range, the Panzerfaust Mind was quickly decommissioned and shelved. Nazi Germany aimed to create a pistol that was effective for everyone to use during World War II. In having this type of gun, weapon costs could be more effective, more of the same would have to be created. In creating a versatile, multi-purpose gun for more infantrymen, taking out other troops could be effective for winning and perfect for the budget. The preliminary purpose of this gun was to be used for target marking, signal flaring, illumination, and more. This pistol was supposed to be a lightweight grenade-based weapon for close-range combat. Unfortunately, it was ultimately decommissioned due to too many ideas for such a small pistol in combat. You didn't think we'd skip weapon accessories, did you? The Zilker 1229 had the frightening codename Vamper, as its primary intention was to provide active infrared technology to the 44 assault rifle during the Second World War. The weight of this accessory was 5 pounds and had the nickname of Night Hunter for its twilight use. Even though the Zilker 1229 was one of the first pieces of gear used in 1945, it was replaced towards the end of the war with other infrared accessories that were in development before the war. Imagine a giant metal beam barreling towards your ship at 767 miles per hour. Where did it come from? Are aliens finally getting back at us for fighting on such beautiful terrain? If you were the first to be taken out by this weapon, you went down in history. The Ruhrstahl SD-1400, also known as the Fritz X, was a radio-controlled anti-ship bomb used during World War II. This bomb was known as the first ever precision-guided bomb in combat, and was the first to actually take down a ship during battle. The weight of the Fritz X warhead was 710 pounds, and had an operational range of more than 3 miles. Signals were sent by the Kell-Strasberg radio control link, and they were to be received by an antenna on the Fritz X. From there, history was made, and ships were taken out. However, the bomb was quite susceptible to countermeasures that dealt with intercepting these signals. After 1944, the Fritz X went out of service, but not before enemies copied the idea with the VB-1 Azon. Many weapons used in the earlier times of technological warfare had the basic premise of using new technologies against enemies that hadn't yet learned to counter them. The German Flechatis is one weapon that used aerial tactics to take down their opponents in a small yet controversial way. The projectile was first seen and used during World War I, and delivery methods varied. Used as small arms ammo, or in shotguns and rockets, this versatile aerial dart just didn't meet expectations. After decommissioning, the United States later used lazy dog bombs that were inspired by the German Flechatis. The Periscope rifle is a type of modified rifle that is still in use today. Invented in 1915 by Lance Corporal William Beach, this rifle allows soldiers to view and fire at the enemy without risking exposure. Quinn's Post was the first primary place that the Periscope rifle was deployed in, as it proved to be simplistic yet more effective than the conventional rifle. Soon after production happened, they were seen in many frontline trenches. So how did they see the enemy if they weren't exposed? Simple, with the use of mirrors and a periscope. Opposing soldiers that weren't armed with periscope rifles couldn't land a shot during the day without risking their lives. Speaking of trenches, the Leach Trench Catapult was an idea conceived and produced in 1915. You don't need to have a talented imagination to get the gist, but a catapult was made and used to launch grenades during World War I. These grenades were 2-pound projectiles that were thrown into the trenches of enemies, but was quickly replaced towards the end of 1915 with the Sauterelle grenade launcher. The British Special Operations Executive Unit in World War II developed a type of animal-based explosive technology to be used against Germany. Unfortunately, many rats were harmed and killed in the creation and deployment of this weapon. Thankfully, it wasn't a weapon that lasted long, as the very first explosive rat was seized by the Germans. While we're sure the Germans got back at the British later, they were actually amazed at the idea of using something so discreet yet simple. In fact, they were so amazed, the explosive rats were then displayed at some of the top military schools. The British Special Ops didn't just fetch the rats out of a sewer. They actually had a supplier that they tricked.
That one.
The supplier was initially told the rats would be used for London University projects. The Yokosuka MXY-7 Oka was a human-guided but rocket-powered kamikaze aircraft that the Japanese used against Allied ships. The US ended up nicknaming the craft Baka, Japanese for fool, and used a rocket engine that went as fast as 391 miles per hour. Only 852 were built before it was retired in 1945 after World War II due to their lack of success. There were many variants of this rocket-powered weapon, and there are many surviving models on display in the United States, Japan, and the United Kingdom. We saved the Silver Bird for last, as it was at the height of technology during 1942. Using lift body engineering and for liquid propellant rocket-powered technology, the Silver Vogel's primary purpose was to be successful in transatlantic travel. Unfortunately, it was kept as a concept due to a miscalculation in re-entry temperature. Because of the real temperature the Silver Bird would re-enter at, it would be burned up in the air and ineffective. Engineers may be crazy smart, but they aren't immune to concepts that don't pan out.
The machine requires the most delicate calibration.
Many of these weapons weren't and still aren't practical for military usage, even though they sound crazy cool. Hopefully the future of military weaponry technology uses some of the aforementioned as inspiration, and they can see the light of day once more, living vicariously through modern skies and deep seas. We hope you enjoyed the video. Tell us in the comments which one was your favorite, and if you liked the video, then don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so that you'll be the first to know when we release a new video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.